Okay guys, so today we're going to go over test 2, which is the test that you took on Monday. Number 1, describe the correlation illustrated by the scatter plot. Now remember, we can either say this is positive, negative, or no correlation. And if we look at our dots, we see that they are not going up, they are also not going down. Really, we can't tell, and because of that, we're going to call this a no correlation. Number 2, the scatter plot shows the relationship between the weekly total sales and the number of different rug designs a drugstore has. Here we see that our dots for the most part are going up, and because of it, we're going to call this a positive correlation. Number 3, tell whether the function y plus 2x squared equals -1 is quadratic and explain. Okay, well, here we don't really have to do it too much. We're being asked if this is a quadratic. Just like you only have two biological parents, you only have two parent functions in Algebra 1. There are y equals x and y equals x squared. Y equals x squared is a quadratic parent function, and basically, if you're looking at something that has an x squared in it, and only an x squared, remember we cannot have a y squared, then we're looking at a quadratic. And if we look at our equation right here, that's pretty much what we're looking at. So this is a quadratic. I'm going to cross out A because that says it's not a quadratic. I'm going to cross out C, and it's not a linear function, but the wrong answer is B. This is a quadratic function because it can be written in the standard form as y equals -2x squared minus 2. And it's true. If we want to move that plus 2x squared to the other side of the equation, all we would have to do is subtract minus 2x squared on both sides, and we would get y equals -2x squared minus 2. Number 4. The coaches of a group of debate teams answered a survey about hours of debate team practice and number of team wins. The graph shows the results of the survey. Which of the following best describes the correlation for this data? Well, for the most part, the points are going up. And because the points are going up, I'm going to call this a positive correlation. Pretty much as the hours of practice per week increases, the number of debates will also increase, which is the better way of saying the dots are going up. Number 5. Which of these are characteristics of the parent function of a quadratic equation? Okay, so I'm going to start by drawing my quadratic parent function. Remember, because we have the letter u in quadratic, the shape of the quadratic parent function is in the shape of a u, and because it originates all other functions, it has to go through the origin. So it looks a lot like that. I'm gonna start, before I even start looking at my facts, I'm gonna start by putting infinities wherever my arrows are pointing. And this arrow right here is facing up and to the right, so I'm going to have infinities to up and to the right, because that means that my graph is never going to stop going up and it's never going to stop going to the right. My second arrow is pointing up and to the left, so I'm going to put an infinity to the left. That's a negative infinity because that's where I have all my negative numbers. And then I don't have any arrows pointing down, which means that below I have a 0. So if I'm examining this, Here's my X. Here's my Y. My X axis goes from side to side. That means that if I'm looking at my domain, because remember, X and Y went to the doctor. If I'm going to look at domain, I'm going to look at my X values. And here I can see that my x-axis, since it goes side to side, my domain would be from negative infinity, because that's what I have on my left side, to positive infinity. Since it's going from infinity to infinity, my domain is going to be all real numbers. My range, which is my y-axis, my range is going from 0 to positive infinity. And so that was something that I still I don't need to do that right now, but I went ahead and labeled my domain and my range just so that it would be easier for me to cancel out some answer choices. Okay, so number 1. The parent function of a quadratic equation opens downward. Nope. This function is facing up. It's not opening downward, so I'm going to say that's wrong. The parent function of a quadratic equation has the y-axis as its line of symmetry. Well, yes, because if this is our y-axis, if we were to fold our parent function in half, then we would get the exact same shape on the left as we would on the right. So that means that it is symmetrical across the y-axis. Number 3, the range of the quadratic parent function is all real numbers. Well, we just said right now that whenever we're looking at the range, we're looking at the y values we're using. That means we focus on the y-axis. Since the y-axis is going up and down, we said that we're going from 0 to positive infinity. And that means that we're using 0 and everything that's bigger than 0. We're not using anything below 0. Therefore, the range is not all numbers. The domain, however, when we look at the domain, we're focusing on our x values, which means we look at our x-axis, which goes from side to side. And we just said right now we're going from negative infinity to positive infinity. From infinity to infinity is the same thing as saying all real numbers. So our domain is all real numbers. Our answers here are 2 and 1. So our answer is B. Which equation is the parent function of the graph represented below? Well, our graph looks like a U. And remember, we only have 2 parents. Well, at least 2 biological parents. In algebra 1, we only have 2 parent functions, which are y equals x and y equals x squared. And in this case, since this is not in the shape of a line, it's in the shape of a U, we're looking at y equals x squared. So our answer has to be B. A and D are definitely not in because those are not parent functions, or at least they're not parent functions that we're looking at. Number 7. Give the domain and range of the relation. Okay, so for this one, we have to go back to drawing our box. Here, to look at the domain, x and y went to the doctor. If we're looking at domain, we're looking at our x values, which means we're looking at our x-axis, which goes from side to side. Here we can see that our x value on the left side is 1. Our x value on the right side is 6. So our domain is going to go from 1 to 6. We have a closed circle at 1, so we're going to have a line underneath our less than there. And have an open circle at x equals 6. So we're not going to put a line underneath. And looking at our answer choices, the only ones that make sense are A and D. But because B doesn't have the line underneath, less than, next to the 6, then B is our answer. And we didn't even have to look at our range. But if we wanted to look at our range, which is, we look at our y values, so we focus on the y-axis, which goes up and down. At the bottom we have 1, and at the top we have 7. So our range would be from 1 to 7, and we are using both of those numbers, so we will put lines underneath. Which of the following best describes the range of the graph below? I'm going to go ahead and stop here. This is part 1 of test 2. Watch part 2 if you want to see the answers for the rest of these.